Hi, I'm Pat Weddle. I'm an economic entomologist and board-certified entomologist emeritus now. I just retired in 2012 from over 40 years of practicing, implementing, and researching IPM. I went to the University of California at Berkeley where I had the very unique opportunity of being trained by such pioneers of IPM as Robert Van Bosch, Lou Falcon, Vernon Stern, Ray Smith, and others, and it was a very unique time to be learning about this particular subject area. And when I first started working in pest management, it was a dirty word. It wasn't 20 years later everybody was doing it. It was quite a time to be involved in the area of integrated pest management, and it was a wonderful career. You know, there's been a lot of discussion over the years as to what the value of IPM is, and I'm sure as many people as have discussed it have opinions about it. Back when IPM was being conceived, it was being conceived because the agrochemical industry had essentially taken over crop protection in every way. Control of insect pests in many field crops such as cotton and certainly in orchard crops had become a very chemically intensive endeavor. It was dominated by the use of broad-spectrum insecticides, which on a short-term basis had a lot of promise, but it became very apparent very soon to people such as Rachel Carson and others that the chemically intensive approach to managing insect pests had severe limitations in terms of human health and safety as well as environmental safety and health. At the same time, there was a group of entomologists, a small group of entomologists, who were very intent on returning crop protection to something that was more biologically intensive. Those were some of my teachers, fortunately. I came into my education at a time when these people were dominating the discussion. And obviously, anytime you challenge an industry such as the ag chem industry, it becomes a very controversial subject area, and we got caught up in that both as students and as early practitioners of integrated pest management. But it was very clear that the intensive use of agricultural chemicals, broad-spectrum agricultural chemicals, was not sustainable. When I first started working in pears and apples, the growers were applying multiple applications of over 14 different active ingredient broad-spectrum insecticides and miticides. And they were constantly on the verge of economic damage or suffering economic damage, even though they were spending tremendous amounts of money and effort spraying these insecticides. What we did in the course of our work was actually start implementing technologies that were being developed back in the early 70s to better understand what pest populations were doing, to take that information and make it available to our clients so that we could make more informed decisions as to whether or not we needed to use these insecticides. And we found that in these orchard cropping systems, we had free services available to us, free services in the form of natural enemies, biological agents that when they weren't being killed or damaged by broad-spectrum pesticides, they could actually perform a large measure of the crop protection that we were seeking. So what we tried to do was understand the benefits of these free services, and in doing so, allow those benefits to prevail. Within a very short number of years, we documented that we had gone from a regime of 14 different active ingredient, broad-spectrum, highly toxic in some cases, insecticides in our orchard systems, and reduced them down to 3 to 5 active ingredient pesticide inputs. And we did it with improved pest control, reduced cost, and oftentimes these pesticides that we were using were either organically approved or considered to be soft materials. Now, this very fact is the reason why IPM is important, because we know that when we use information as a surrogate to the prophylactic use of pesticides, that information, in fact, reduces the need for those insecticides on a long-term basis. So why did growers adopt integrated pest management in their orchard systems? A lot of the adoption occurred because of crisis. In the various programs that we've worked in over the years, both in California, in other parts of the state, and other parts of the world where we've worked, we found that the programs that were grower-driven were the ones that had the most success. And what caused these growers to desire to change from a chemically intensive to more biologically intensive IPM programs? Typically, it was a crisis. A lot of times these crises manifest themselves as resistance to key insecticides that the growers relied heavily on to control key pests. In some cases, the crisis was regulatory, where growers were losing insecticides due to regulatory attrition and were seeking ways of minimizing the risks associated with the loss of those insecticides, attempting to find a better way of doing crop protection. So integrated pest management was the answer to many of these concerns. Integrated pest management in orchard crops and other crops has always been a struggle. Those of us who have conducted these programs, those of us who have implemented these programs on site-specific basis, working daily and weekly and yearly with these growers to implement these programs, we found that it's a constant struggle because the environment that we're working in is changing in multiple dimensions. The orchard physical environment itself was constantly changing. The climatic environment is changing. The political and regulatory environment is changing. The economic environment that we worked in was changing. So we really had to be change agents. We had to be people who could adapt, could evolve, in order to bring to our clients the best resources that we could so that they could make the most informed decisions that they possibly could with respect to their crop protection needs. And in doing so, we found that on a long-term basis, and certainly on a short-term basis, the economics of what we were attempting to do prevailed. And that's not to say that everybody conducted as intensive level of IPM as we did. But you know, our clientele basically were growers that we worked with for over 30 years. They stuck with us through thick and thin, and we with them. And I think that says something about the desire on the part of many growers to do the best they can in conducting the most rational kinds of approaches to their crop protection needs. There's been some major changes over the years. When we were first doing this work, these pesticides were highly toxic. They in many cases had a high residual life on the fruits that we were protecting. By their nature, they were highly residual. There was a lot of concern about the residues of these chemicals on fruits and vegetables, which led to a lot of regulatory change that affected how we use these chemicals. And there was a lot of resistance to that because there was a large economic interest in preserving and continuing the use of these products. And many times people find it difficult to change. We could always go to our clients and say that as a result of the IPM efforts that we were conducting, the serious changes in chemical use were not as critical to them because we knew how to provide an alternative approach to this heavy reliance on some of these chemicals. Our growers were already relying on these things much less than what was happening in the rest of their community. So it was really a valuable thing to be able to put these people, these growers' minds to rest when we could go in and say, just because resistance is showing up, it's not going to affect you. Or just because we're going to lose an azon-phosmethyl, it's not going to affect you that much because we don't need it like other people do. I think these were some of the real benefits of IPM to our clients. In addition to the economic benefits, these guys could actually sleep better at night. It used to be that it was chemicals that make them, the spraying of pesticides that helped them to sleep at night. In later years, it was actually the knowledge that they didn't need to spray these materials that helped them to sleep at night. And the key to all this was constantly monitoring the pest populations, monitoring the natural enemy populations, and trying to manage these populations so that they never really approached an economic level of damage in the case of the pests. It was much easier and much cheaper to manage pest levels at very, very low levels than it was to let them approximate an economic threshold and then come in and try and manage them in these annual cropping systems such as orchards. So in conclusion, I think going forward with all the new developments in pesticides, with the continued pressures that are on growers from regulatory circles, with international trade and the need to be very cautious about residue levels on fruit, with the developing information that we have on how to manage populations of organisms, both disease, insect and other arthropods, as well as vertebrates. I think that we're going to find that the more intelligent approaches that we can bring to our agricultural cropping systems as they relate to crop protection, the more sustainable, the more enduring, and the more economic will be that thing that we call agriculture. And certainly it will be in the best interests of the people that we all try and serve, the growers.